Okay, hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us for tonight's artist talk as part of the Looking Out and Looking In Philadelphia Center for the Book Members Exhibition in collaboration with Swarthmore College Libraries. I'm Kara Petralia, the current board president of the Philadelphia Center for the Book. Our mission is to advance the book as a vital contemporary art form, connecting diverse community of institutions and individuals whose passion is books. We do this through a variety of programs from our artist working group, Book Paper Scissors Artist Book Fair, annual members exhibition, the Edible Book Festival, and open books events like this one. Membership with PCB entitles you to access these programs and provides support for us to continuing offering these events and connecting the book arts community of Greater Philadelphia. For more information about our current and upcoming programs, please visit our website at philadelphiacenterforthebook.org. During this program, we ask that you keep yourself muted unless you're actively speaking to the group to help limit interruptions. We will be recording this as we are now, and we'll be sharing it publicly. So if you prefer to not have your video or voice included in the presentation, you can turn off your video and use the chat function to ask questions. I'd now like to pass the screen to Susan Biggers, our exhibition committee chair, to talk more about the exhibition and introduce tonight's artists.
Well, since most of the people here, or nearly all the people here, are artists that are in it, you know about the topic. And one of the things that became very clear as I was sort of working with the books, how entangled looking out and looking in become. It's rare. It's a time, but it's rare that they are totally separate. This is a partnership with Swarthmore College Libraries and the McCabe Library collection. The artist book collection is really remarkable, which is one reason why it's a good collaboration, a partnership. This is hybrid, not only a partnership, but hybrid. And I very much believe in physical exhibitions. On the other hand, books need to be handled usually, and exhibitions do not allow for that. And in some ways, this virtual or online exhibition can show a great deal that the others, that an in-flesh exhibition can't. I still like seeing them. It's amazing how different they are when you see them, when you really see them, or that you see them digitally. Mostly, not always, but mostly. And I guess that's it. I mean, I'm going to first ask Jude Hoffman. I noticed her that she said Jude, and who's going to talk about her books. Okay, Jude, you are on. And I will bring up the exhibition with your images. You can tell me what to, I will move around, or you can tell me what to point to. So here you are. Do you want to begin? Yeah.
Right. Well, Susan had mentioned.
Wait a second, you know what? I didn't introduce you at all. Oh. So let me just say, her artistry is not easily categorized. I was trying to figure out what to say about it. She uses a variety of materials and processes, some not typically associated with bookmaking, such as jewelry techniques. Her dreams are a frequent source of her books. Okay, now take it away.
Okay, thank you. Susan had mentioned that maybe I could talk about the eco dye paper, which I use a very basic process. So I'm going to go through that really fast. I start out with a piece of, this is my book page basically, and I make a stack of these and just stack them up with leaves and bits of rusty metal and sometimes, well, I throw pennies in somewhere, often in the bottom of the pan. And I think the copper and the rust really makes an interesting effect with the leaves. The leaves I use, of course, are local. So, I mean, you'd have to do your own experiments. After I've stacked them up, I put something hard on the outside. On this size, I'm using a tin can that I cut open and flattened out. And I clip them together with the big binder clips, the biggest ones I can find. And the stack gets fairly thick by the time you've crammed leaves and everything in here. So that's the limit to the number of pages. I also cut some 1-ply museum board and dye that in the same dye bath, and also a length of linen thread for binding, so that everything is kind of in the same color family, although different papers are going to be kind of different.
I'm going to interrupt. Are you seeing the screen? Or I'm not sharing.
I'm seeing.
You're not. No, okay. Then I'm going to show the screen because I'm.
Oh, the book. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah. There. So those are that's bagasse paper, and it's eco dyed. And the other book is 140-pound watercolor paper, I believe. And that's also eco dyed. My goal, you can see a rusty bit on the back cover of Stolen Shadows. My goal is not to get a perfect leaf print. A lot of people stress over, you know, it has to be perfect, but I just want the colors and the modeling and everything that happens to it. I think it makes the pages interesting. Plain pages aren't very, very exciting. And I also at times have collaged on bits of collage paper. I don't think I did on these, but you can collage your paper on before you dye it, which is also very interesting. And then after I've made my sandwich of papers with the leaves and everything, I put them in a big pan and I pour boiling hot water on it, and I go away and leave it for 3 or 4 days. And then I start peeking to see if I'm happy with the amount of coloration on the pages. I mean, it's really that simple. There are complicated methods of doing this with, I think they're basically fiber techniques, and I don't know anything about it. So
say a little bit about these particular books.
Okay, this book, I think both of my books fit the theme so well. I was so excited when I saw the theme of the show, because in this book, I'm talking about those moments when you look, it's like you look outside or something, the sun is shining, you just go, oh my gosh, it's a beautiful day, you know? Or sometimes it's raining and misty and foggy. I like those days too. So I just wanted to point out how awesome it is to have these moments of seeing the world and appreciating it. And the other book, The Stolen Shadows, is a bunch of drawings of people in my family who have all died. And to me, they go together because, of course, you know, you have to remember your life is going to end. And it's a good idea to be here in this moment and appreciating the way things are, you know, happening right now. So I think that's it. I think I've run down.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you.
Okay.
So Angela Copez will be the second person. And she's a Philadelphian and a recent graduate of the University of the Arts MFA Book Arts printmaking program. She described herself as a printmaker, a ceramicist, and a book artist. Angelique.
Hello, all. Nice to see you. I submitted my most recent book titled Stunted Growth. It was actually printed by Jude Hoffman at Paper Press Punch. I highly recommend working with her in Seattle, Washington. In a lot of my free work, I like to do a lot of Sumi Nagashi marbling and decorative paper marbling. And I like to use them in a way to tell a narrative. So a lot of my work surrounds about mental illness and the human condition, how our bodies will work with each other or against each other in the act of remaining well. So I wanted to make the main theme of this book being about those experiences that we face, where there's a lot of trauma in our lives and we feel like we are missing out on certain things and we feel like we're being left behind or our expectations aren't meeting reality. So I tried to tell this story by using these different cutouts in the marble patterns. So even though the pattern is incomplete, it's bleeding onto the other pattern behind it, creating a new pattern and telling a different story. So the book is completely textless. besides the title and the colophon, which breaks it down. So I wanted it to be more of an open read. And I really enjoyed how some of these marbling patterns related like back to macro stills of the body. Like some of them feel very muscular to me. Some of them have more circular images like cells, and it felt very visceral. So I was really excited to put this book together.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Erica Mina, who is a Puerto Rican poet, translator, and book artist. And she is in the process of moving to Finland, I just found out. And I really didn't expect her to be able to talk, but she claimed she was a night owl. I guess maybe she is. But anyway, she is zooming in from Finland.
I am, and actually my pronouns in English are they, them. Just a quick correction there. So I'm a Puerto Rican. I grew up in the diaspora in Boston, and I made this book in collaboration with two other Puerto Rican artists, Raquel Salas Rivera, who at the time was the Philadelphia Poet Laureate, though now they have moved back to San Juan and are working in poetry and arts there, and Mariana Ramos Ortiz, who was is a Puerto Rican printmaker who was a student at the University of Puerto Rico. And in the aftermath of Hurricane Maria in 2017, joined my book arts class at Brown University, where I was teaching before I moved to Finland. The hurricane of 2017 completely decimated the power grid in the island of Puerto Rico, and some communities are still without power now, 5 years later, including the very rural mountain community where my family is from in Maricao. Power is still primarily being supplied by personal generators. And the power situation, if you haven't been following the news in Puerto Rico, is still quite dire. But this book came out of a poem that Raquel wrote in the aftermath of the hurricane, initially titled, and the title of this book is Gringo Death Coloring Book. The poem turned into Raquel's full-length book, While They Are Sleeping, Under the Bed is Another Country. And the book, the text is written bilingually in English and in Spanish, but it's not a direct translation. So in order to fully read the book, one needs to be a bilingual reader of English and Spanish, as the majority of Puerto Ricans are. And that's what made it feel particularly relevant to this exhibit for me, is that the text and the book itself is both opening to and defying the colonial gaze. And as Puerto Ricans who either grew up or were living in the diaspora, we all had this collective experience of being outside of the island looking in and seeing how other Americans, non-Puerto Ricans, were looking at us in the diaspora and the island in that moment of national attention in the aftermath of Hurricane Maria. So the paper is handmade. Mariana and I spent a summer making it. It's made out of abaca in the outer. It's a carousel book structure, 3 layers in cloth-bound board. The outer layer where the text is letterpress printed from handset metal type is made from abaca fiber. The images are printed from linoleum blocks that Mariana and I designed and Mariana carved on tengujo paper, and the back paper that gives the book its structure is amate, which is a laid paper from Mexican cactus plants. And we were especially interested in combining fibers from indigenous, Western, and Asian sources because the Puerto Rican identity is essentially a combination of different origins, there isn't sort of, Puerto Rican isn't a race as many Puerto Ricans struggle with. The text, as I said, is letterpress printed from handset metal type. I did all of the printing at Brown University while I was teaching there and bound it here in Finland at my new studio. We made an edition of, well, we were aiming for 20, but we ended up with 17, but I'm still pretty happy with that. And then I don't think I have great pictures, but we did also make a limited edition in this handmade wooden box that contains the book. So that's that.
Thank you. Roni. And I'm going to let you share your screen because you're going to show your images yourself, correct? Roni? You're muted.
Okay, it says I can't share the screen while
Okay, I'll
another
stop my
participant.
sharing and then you can share.
Okay,
Now you should be able to share.
yes. Okay. Here we go.
And let me just say, that, I mean, a number of people obviously know Roni because you could talk before we started. But she's a multi-talented and extremely accomplished artist who, among other things, publishes limited edition letterpress printed books. She's taught at numerous places and is presently teaching at the Center for Book Arts. And what was the other place? Purchase?
SUNY Purchase.
SUNY
Purchase.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Susan. The book that's in the show is called The Valley, and it came about because I was at a poetry reading where I heard the poet Elsbeth Pancrazzi read, I think it was 2 poems at the time. And I was very interested in these poems, partly because of the configuration. And what she had done is each poem was written in a series of 2 columns. And you could either read down the columns or across the columns. And I was fascinated by that. And there was also a darkness that I didn't know where it was coming from, but I was very intrigued by it. And so I met with her and she decided to write 4 more poems. And now this book is a series of 6 poems that have an unusual configuration, you know, in that I've maintained her structure of being able to read across or read down. And so the typefaces that I used are dissimilar and they trade places throughout the poem, that it clues the reader into the idea that there is more than one way to read this poem. So let me show you a little bit of it and then I will continue. So this is the cloth covered case for it. And this is the cover of the book. It is an accordion. And this is one side of the accordion expanded. So what you are seeing is handset metal type, which actually comes from the collection of the former Lowell Bodger, who was quite a famous typographer, and the Center for Book Arts is the lucky recipient of his gift. So also you're seeing some polymer drawings, and the large flats of color are foam. This was a collaboration with my husband, Peter Schell, who's a sculptor. And it took me a very long time to kind of settle on a form for this poem. I mean, it was probably 2 years easily after I spoke with Elsbeth that we started to work and felt that we were going in a direction that made sense. So the position of the type to the folds and the visual elements was designed to speak of the emotional tension, pain, violence, grief, and the passage through it. The palette was designed to be in opposition to the tone of the poems so that they could speak louder. The visual forms had more of a hard-edged quality in opposition to the softness of the colors, love and violence right up against each other. And I want to show you some close-ups of some of the spreads. And I'm going to read one of them just so that you have the experience of how the poem feels reading across one way and the other. When you laugh, I feel your dying come on between stabs, almost betrayed. I remind you, make your wish. When you laugh between stabs, I feel almost betrayed. You're dying. I remind you, come on, make your wish. And here is another one showing one of the drawings with it. So the poet has encapsulated the concerns of this series, saying, these poems are compact meditations on loss, a breadcrumb trail through the territory of grief. And so I felt that Elsbeth's titling of it, The Valley, kind of takes us on a journey, into, all of the tension of racing toward a person before they're gone, and then going down into the grief of loss, and then coming back to a place where you can appreciate the world and the beauty that is outside and be able to see it again after this very intense sadness. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing.
And have you done?
Yes, I'm
Okay.
done.
Thank you, thank you. And I am going to share the screen and go to Peter O'Brien. Peter is zooming in from Toronto, so he's one of the people that's relatively far away, though I didn't know about Quebec. He's written and edited numerous books and published widely on art and writing. His 10-year, I think it's a 10-year Finnegan's Wake project which is 3 pages of which is part of this exhibition, has received considerable attention both in the literary and in the art fields. So again, somebody bridging that art and literature. Okay, Peter.
Away alone, alas, loved, along the river run, past even Adams, from swerve of shore to bend of bay, brings us by a commodious vicus of recirculation back to Hoath Castle and environs. That's the end and the beginning of arguably the most labyrinthine and difficult artwork ever created. James Joyce's final work, Finnegan's Wake, incorporates about 75 different languages, and Joyce's own sui generis, maybe even generous, playful understanding of language. He worked on the book for about 17 years. I said the end and the beginning because if you know anything about the book, you likely know that it's circular, with the quote unquote last word being the, and the quote unquote first word being river run. Joyce wanted his readers to spend their whole life studying his perpetual books. As he says, his ideal reader would suffer from an ideal insomnia. So my artist book is called Lots of Fun with Finnegan's Wake. It's a 10-year project to explicate for myself and to illustrate and to disrupt this most arcane of all books. It's a way for me to connect the intellectual with the illustrative and the visual with the verbal. I should say I hope to complete it in 10 years. I'm just under halfway through the 628 pages of the book, of the project, and I'm slightly behind schedule. And at the end of this process, whenever that happens, I'll have 1 copy of my book. For those of you interested, my media include felt pens, graphite, acrylic, archival glitter glue that I make, Japanese paper, strips of copper, metallic gel pens, and bodily fluids and humors. I'm under various delusions, but I'm under no audience-specific delusions. I know that no one ever will read all of my exegetical and idiosyncratic glosses. There are so few people who actually read Finnegan's Wake. Why would I assume that they will read an artist book that piles on top of that already overburdened and overstuffed literary work, yet more layers, yet more mysteries, yet more images, yet more entanglements? And I'm going to end where I began. Away alone, alas, loved, along the river run, past even Adams, from swerve of shore to bend of bay, brings us by a commodious vicus of recirculation back to Hoath Castle and environs.
Thank you. I have a very practical question. That's not, you say that at the end you'll have one whole book, but I know you've sold at least a few of these. How are you handling that? Do you sell?
I sort of forgot about the inconsistency of that. I'm actually selling individual pages. So at the end, I won't even have a whole book.
Yeah, I was
Some of
wondering.
the pages have already been dispersed. So,
I hope you at least keep, images of them.
yeah, I'm trying to remember to do that. Yeah, excellent point, Susan.
A lot of work that's gone into each page.
Yeah, I've been reading the book for about 45 years or so, and I still have a long way to go just in reading the book. So yeah, that's the project. Yeah.
Most people who have dipped their toes in Finnegan's Wake have just read the first couple pages. And I'm in that category.
Yeah, or if you really, the Anna Livia Plurabelle chapter, arguably the most musical words that have ever been collected on any page throughout history, is not a bad place to start. Or even if you haven't ever dipped into Finnegan's Wake, I suggest you just flip it open at any page, really any of the 628 pages, and just read a couple sentences. It'll take you a little while to read a couple sentences, but that's not a bad introduction, just at any page.
I wonder if there must be a reading of it, or reading of parts of it. I would think
there are multitudinous readings, guidebooks. I do suggest that you read guidebooks. And if you're familiar with Finnish, to invoke an earlier language, or any other language, Latin, Greek, Spanish, any of those languages, Swahili, will help you as you read the book, because Joyce, as I say, integrated all these different languages into the book. So a lot of them just kind of pop out. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Karen Viola is the person that I'm going to go to last. Thank you, Karen, for being last. She's zooming in from Quebec, I find out. She worked for many years as a designer of innovative children's books. Her approach to artist book is comparably innovative. She presently runs her own business, which she describes as a micro publishing company. Okay, Karen, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Okay, I will try to be brief because I have two books to talk about.
Which one would you like to talk about first?
This one is fine, the On the Fence book. And this actually came from the Are You Book Enough Instagram challenge. The word was fenced, and I found it was very interesting challenge for me, because I had so many ideas and I found myself extremely torn between these ideas. And I kind of reflected on the fact that I'm often in that position. I go in many directions and I can never decide, or I feel like I've got one foot in one world and my other foot in another world. And, whether it's fine art and commercial art and psychology versus sociology. And I just started to realize that, maybe it's okay to kind of be in the in-between. So I wrote this poem that was sort of inspired by this. And I also wanted to make use of these wine bottle sleeves that I had been collecting and kind of on the fence about whether I should keep them or throw them out. But I decided to make use of them. They kind of reminded me of construction site fences. They were flexible, temporary, and portable. And so I was sort of thinking about boundaries, how important they are, but they shouldn't be so rigid necessarily. But boundaries are important because without them, we can't push them. So my poem kind of played with that, and just to be in that liminal space of seeing these both worlds is something maybe to celebrate, and kind of like complementarity, which is a word that I've recently learned, and intersectionality. And the poem is very short, so I'll read it. On the fence, the fickle brink of here or there, the cramp and strain, the pain of in between, to stay or go, to keep or throw, the boundary shivers in perplexity. But without the fence, where would the sense of freedom be? Okay, so that's that book. And the next one is called Quiver. And this was a very personal, introspective kind of book. To sum it up, it was like I wanted to make this prayerful mantra for myself. As I'm sure everyone here understands, it's when you're a sensitive person and you feel things very deeply, it's pretty rugged. It's hard in this world of turmoil to kind of get by without feeling a lot of pain. So I was thinking a lot about the kind of Freudian idea of defense mechanisms and ways of coping. And I also had in my mind sometimes the value of being able to contain your emotions so that you can be with them and maybe think about how to convert, how to go forward in a adaptive way. And it often comes down to the body, how joy and wonder and pain manifests in the body, and to pay attention to that. Because when you really pay attention to it, you're more present and then you can cope. And so I sort of thought of this quiver of arrows, like that I had, ways of coping, directions that had to do with mind and body, and sort of a conversation between mind and body. Even though they really are one, we have a tendency to need to delineate things. And I do get in my head a lot. And so I played with this conversation between the mind and body to remind myself to just take care of myself. And these arrows were made from wood, basswood, and I used mixed media, acrylic media. I just printed on my home printer. Both these books, really, I just used materials that I had at home, and they're one of a kind. So, but the cool thing about this particular book is I took a long time to figure out how I was physically going to make this. The quiver itself is made from various scraps of samples. Susan, if you want to scroll to show the other pictures. Yeah, I don't know if she's here. Cassandra, I think she's here.
I'm here.
Hi, Cassandra.
Hi.
She so kindly sent some samples because we had a working artist group, and I was trying to figure out how to make my quiver to contain my arrows. And yeah, so she sent me some really neat samples of pig skin, and yeah, I can share
Wait a second,
my screen.
Yeah, okay, why don't you do it? I can get to it again, but if
Okay,
you have it right there, or I'll do it.
go ahead. If you have it, go ahead.
Okay, let me just get a new.
I don't know which would be quicker.
Yeah, I know. I could just open up a new.
But yeah, so it was really neat to receive this bunch of samples in the mail, and then I was able to actually make the quiver from these materials that she sent me, and it was a nice kind of gift that allowed me to contain my arrows that fan out like a fan. They're connected, so they kind of read like pages in order. But yeah, so I think I've talked enough, so I'll leave it there.
I'm impressed by how succinct and short everyone was. So Kara, do you want to take over, or can we just have any questions or any comments here?
Yeah, let's have some questions or comments. Anybody want to jump in?
It's always hard at the beginning.
I have a question for Peter. Everybody, all of the material or materiality of all of the books was just so great to see. Everybody, I thought, really incorporated different things that were available to them. But Peter said the passing phrase, I believe, glitter glue you make archival glitter glue. Can you just elaborate on that a little bit for my material interests?
I thought you were going to ask about the bodily fluids and humors, but no, you're just asking about the. So I just use archival glue, and then I use my own glitter glue, or just glitter. So I just use archival glue, and then I mix other stuff in with it. So when I say make it, it ain't that complicated. But there's lots of different kinds of glitter made of shards of glass, synthetic stuff, bits of shiny stuff. So just whatever you want. But yeah.
I was curious if you had some secret about that side of things.
I do not.
Glitter
I have no secrets and none about that. Yeah. So
I have a follow-up for Peter. What is the actual size of your pages? Because you're writing on them, right?
Yeah.
You're creating the text.
It's 8.5 by 11, just whatever my printer would accommodate. The only thing I don't just take a photocopy of each page, because that doesn't give me enough room. So I actually have to recreate each page in this very idiosyncratic language. So I have to redo each page to give me a little bit more space between the lines, a little more leading between the lines. And then that's what I print off on, just my shitty little printer here. And then I just go to work on that. So yeah, pretty simple.
Not terribly simple. That part may be simple, but the rest isn't. No, it's a very impressive, group of works of various sorts. I really appreciate you talking, and I'm sorry that we can't have more people. I wasn't even supposed to have 6. I was supposed to just have 5. So everyone was.
Everybody took to their time. I think
I
you
know,
were doing
I know.
good.
I know, but I would have liked now to have had more, because there's some wonderful pieces in there in the show, and all the pieces are in the exhibition online. Not all the pieces are at Swarthmore. Most of them are, but and most of the books are, but not everything could fit in Swarthmore, and there were other reasons of exhibition related that we couldn't have, but everything is at online. So
could you speak to the process of actually visiting the exhibit? Because you mentioned, just the ability to get up close and personal.
Right.
What will Swarthmore allow?
Well, each person that goes needs to email Susan Dreyer, and that has been communicated to all the artists by Kara, and say the time you're coming, the day and the time, and then she will locate it. And you at the same time need to go on and enter a very simple, or fill out a very simple form saying you've had your COVID vaccination and so forth. And then, when at the time it's to come, you just go in and you get outside the McCabe Library, you call, and your name will be at the desk and they will let you in. So it sounds like there are a lot of steps, but it's really pretty easy. The only thing is you have to decide when you want to go early on. And you have to have been vaccinated, or at least you have to say that.
Well,
I'd like to just hear Jude in the chat from Wendy. I just didn't know if somebody was monitoring the chat.
Oh, I didn't.
I was about to get there.
Great.
One quick thing though about visiting,
you.
if any of the artists didn't get my email book at Philadelphia Center for the Book.org, and I can resend you the information. I was planning on resending it next week anyways, just to make sure everybody got it. But yeah, so Wendy had asked a question for Jude. Is there tea in your concoction, or are the leaves and metal bits the tea?
I put a tea bag into the hot water. Yes.
Okay, great.
And Lena Josen gave a link to the poet that Erica has spoken of. Thank you.
Yep. And Karen has a question or something.
I just wanted to say, if anyone in Philly is able to, go see the exhibit, take pictures and I don't know, post it on Facebook or something. Be nice, because I live in White Plains, so I won't be able to go down, but be nice to see how everything looks presentation.
There is projected, I hate to say until it's over, a walkthrough video that will be made.
Oh, okay,
I
perfect.
hope.
Yeah.
I think, I shouldn't say that. I'm anxious about it.
Once the video is available, we will definitely email everybody and then post it all over social media. So
Awesome.
be on the lookout for sure.
Cool.
Well, I'm going November 22nd with my daughter. I'll be happy to take pictures and post them on Facebook.
That sounds great.
Yay.
Susan, I wonder, can I invoke a book artist who's not in the show just for fun? He had a big show at the Philadelphia Museum of Art in 2018, Keith Smith.
Oh, hi, yeah.
And I hope people don't mind, but I wrote quite a long piece on artist books some years ago, and a book that he produced called book number 984 has really stayed with me since then. And you used the phrase "in the flesh" earlier in your conversation about books. So I hope people don't mind. I'm just going to read his book 84. When I was a student, I was repulsed and attracted by a display at the Field Museum of a cross-section of a cadaver, sandwiched and sealed between sheets of glass filled with formaldehyde. Upon my death, my body should be frozen, sliced vertically with a bandsaw into 1-inch thick sections. Each of the 15 slices should be sealed between 2 pieces of double weight glass, 5 foot 6 inches by 12 inches. A narrow metal frame should seal each panel, which contains a slice of me, the remainder of the area of each panel filled with formaldehyde. Each of the 15 sections should be placed in order, hinged one to the next along the back side. The book should be stood in the corner, slightly opened, in the entrance room to my house, to be renamed Keith Smith Memorial Library, chosen over the name the Keith Smith Living Library. Anyways, that's his book number 84, and I've always found it kind of intriguing for obvious reasons. It hasn't yet come to be because he's still around, but that's a future book, I think, future artist book that I think will have some interest. Anyways, hope you don't mind me reading that book in its entirety.
That's hilarious.
Hilarious, yeah.
Yeah, I'm having certain, I can see it, which is scary.
Oh, it's very much like that exhibit that was traveling around about a decade ago. I think it started in Germany, of bodies, bodies that have been preserved and cut open and sliced and examined in just such a fashion, maybe not as artistically done as a book might be, but I think the point of the exhibit was to sort of open the body literally as a book, and to reveal it layer by layer by layer, corpuscle by corpuscle. So it's an idea that's out there.
Did people see his show in Philadelphia in 2018, Keith Smith? Oh.
Susan, you're muted.
Susan, you're muted.
You're muted, Susan.
I was going to say, while she's unmuting, yes,
yes, we did.
Number of people saw it, and my favorite part was that he gave a talk that lasted for about 7 minutes, and then he said, "I think that's it." If you want to know more, you can look at the book. The end. It's pretty fantastic.
Philadelphia Center of the Book had an event at the show. I mean, we went there as a members event. It really was a great show. And he is certainly a hugely significant and influential book artist. Structure, relation of text and image, text, books that are all text, books that are all images, books that are all structure, combinations of the books that are conceptual.
Alina points out nicely that this resonates well with Angelique's comments about the book's marbled paper similarity to anatomical structures. So definitely seems like there's a good theme happening here.
not to bring it back to this book, the Gringo Death coloring book, on purpose, but it actually does remind me of a line that didn't make it into our artist book, but is from the full-length manuscript, which is, "We only exist when we're dying." Which, of course, from the colonial gaze standpoint, it has some sort of political critique in it. But for me, it was one of my very favorite lines in the book, and thinking about, the body as a book and how we only exist in the time in which we are dying. Maybe something to do also with Keith's work.
Actually, that reminds me of Emily Dickinson's poetry. Some of her poetry, her dying poetry.
For those of you who created books that represent long-term projects, Peter and there's another book that was 2 years in the making.
And mine has been 5.
Yeah, yours was 5. How do you keep that idea front and center? Is the idea evolving over time? Do you see yourself actually implementing whatever was the original blueprint? How do you work around that kind of time frame to produce something?
I can say something very quick. I try not to think too much. I just try to keep churning away at it. It's a strange process. Of course, it changes over time. And if you think too much, like going to the gym or eating good food, never really happens. So I just keep, I just sit down and try to grab a felt pen or something else and start working. So, and as I say, unfortunately, I think it's going to be more than 10 years, but again, can't think about that stuff. I don't anyways.
And do you think if you compared what you, go ahead.
It's okay. Oh, I was just going to say, in the course of the several years that I worked on this book, I changed courses. I knew that I wanted to work with the text. I mean, that remained my focus, but I did a series of drawings. I made a mock-up. It didn't feel right. I think I showed it to Elsbeth. I think she was probably kind about it, but, I didn't feel that it was right. And so I couldn't really go forward with it. And then somehow, it was maybe over like a Christmas break. And I said to my husband, let's just go into the studio and try to work in a really loose way. And we felt really good about that. And when the thing feels right, and you can't force it. It comes when it comes. So, I mean, the writing was always primary for me. I never lost my desire to work with it, but I, just took whatever time it took to find the form for it.
Yeah, and I would say, over 5 years, because I was teaching full-time when we started the project, I was only able to really work during the summers and winters during the semester breaks. And then 2 years ago, when I started building my studio in Finland and moving to a new country and expatriating, essentially because I became disabled and was no longer able to work full-time in academia, there was a lot of life stuff that got in the way. So probably it could have been a little bit of a faster project, but making all of that paper by hand, of course, takes an immense amount of time. So once I relocated to Finland, I was able to get some grants that supported finishing the work. But right away, Mariana, who did the images, we almost immediately agreed on which poems from the book and the form and the materials. So all of this we had a really clear vision for it, and we're in almost complete agreement from the beginning. And then it was just a matter of the processes taking the time that they took, with life and work happening around them. And I found actually, as I was finishing it last month or the month before on this grant, I was actually quite sad to be done with it. It felt like I was saying goodbye to this friend that had been accompanying me through some of the most major life changes that I've been through. And I'm at the same time very happy that it's moving out into the world and it's going to find an audience and readership. But for me, the hardest part was actually like finishing it and then feeling like, okay, now I have to say goodbye to this. And I already knew what my next project would be, so that wasn't a problem. But, you know, really, I wonder, Peter, if you're going to have that problem at the end of your project too.
I was just going to say, invoking you, Erica, and to be a little bit geographical about it, for me, it's not all about the finish. Sorry to be so geographical, but you know.
It's okay. One of my favorite things about living in Finland is all of the great puns that we can make in English from the word finish. You know, the Finnish don't call themselves the Finnish. They say Suomi, which means, well, Suo is the Finnish word for swamp. So, you know, the people of the swamp.
Erica, you bring up something else when you talk about developing your book. That's a collaboration, which brings in another complication. It can be a great assistance, but it is a major complication. Have you done much of your work as collaboration? Is your next book a collaboration, or?
Almost all of my work has been collaboration. I love working collaboratively. I was trained as a poet and a literary translator. I like sort of fell into book arts haphazardly while I was at the University of Iowa. And so I don't have a visual arts background. So I always work, or I like to work with people who do have that training, because it adds so much to the work that I'm doing in literature, and bringing those two things together feels extremely exciting for me. But my next book is actually going to be a solo project. So I'm learning some new skills. I'm learning ceramics. I'm doing some glass work. Expanding my skill set now that I'm not teaching full time, so that I can sort of fulfill the vision that I have without relying on other artists. But no, I actually really love collaboration. So I think the one after that will be a collaborative book.
And Roni, you basically work frequently in collaboration.
I work mostly collaboratively, and I really enjoy that. I mean, I'm very motivated by language. So I've worked very often with contemporary poets, and that has been really a very fulfilling thing for them and for me. I think for them, they get to see their work physicalized in a way that they wouldn't necessarily have imagined. And I like to have the work be multisensory, so that it's not just a visual thing that you are encountering, but you are experiencing it tactily. And in terms of sound, and you are participating in it. So it's very interesting, because my husband is a sculptor. It allows me to extend the work physically in a way that I wouldn't be able to with my own skills. So I really enjoy that.
It's interesting, the people for whom materials and the physical is the main inspiration, and the people that are a main inspiration is the language. I mean, I don't know if people fall into those two simple categories. They probably feed into each other, but many people come from one or the other. And even in this discussion, it would seem people would come from one or the other.
Ultimately, it's all about story, it seems.
Yeah.
Everybody's got a narrative and a story. Can I ask Jude a question before we sign off, if it seems like we're headed that way? What is the source of your images? How do you create the images that help you tell a story on your eco-printed paper?
The drawings were just done from photographs. And the collages were a combination of drawings that I did and collage from all those sources that people use.
What sources? No, what sources?
Well,
be a little bit more specific.
Okay, well, for collage, I rely on old books, comic books, just glancing through here. A lot of comic books. There's some drawings of people in my family. The the guy on the cover of the Wonderment book is from a book on how to go camping. They show these kids cutting down trees to make shelters, and I mean it's awful, right? But the drawings are you know, they're interesting. I don't know. I mean, I just gather stuff up all over.
Could I ask a question to Angelique? If Angelique is still here. I'm wondering about you said that the book was printed, but it looked to me like the paper was marbled. So could you talk a little bit about what the marbling and printing processes were like for you?
Sure. Yeah, I actually, these were old marbled papers that I've marbled myself, and I actually scanned them and sent them over to Jessica, who during the risograph process, if those who aren't familiar with it, they will scan your image and it will turn into a stencil, which will wrap around like an ink barrel. And then as it's printing, it'll squeeze the ink through, through the stencil, through the paper. So it makes this great quality of your image. So it kept all that natural marbling and all the different qualities to the paper itself, which I really liked. And we were able to manipulate the multiples and create this different story with about, I think it was only 4 different patterns we worked with.
Wow. Okay. And then did you do the cutting yourself on each edition?
Yeah, I actually used a silhouette machine to make sure everything was accurate and precise. Yeah. But then I scanned the images again, and then I drew on them and then ended up doing the cutting.
Really cool.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, everyone. We're just about at our end time. So this has been wonderful. Susan, would you like to add anything before we close?
I just want to thank people. Thank people for coming. Thank people for speaking. Thank people for sending in their work. I really appreciate it. It's been really fun to work with, and it was fun to hear you talk. I certainly learned a great deal. Thank you.
Susan, thank you.
Thanks, Susan.
Keep having us.
Thanks, everyone. It was inspiring.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yes. Bye, everyone.